As Vladimir Putin makes a statement with his barrage of deadly strikes on Kyiv, the Russian leader is now facing trouble at home, as we hear from CNN's Claire Sebastian.
Two women screaming at each other over a spot in line at a Moscow gas station. Scenes like these are becoming more common as intensifying Ukrainian drone attacks have caused fuel shortages and panic buying. CNN's analysis has found that at least 50 of Russia's regions, well over half, are now officially reporting supply problems. Unofficial reports coming from almost everywhere else. Lines outside gas stations forming from Moscow to Siberia. And here in the southern Krasnodar region, a video emerged showing two women berating a man for filling up a gas canister. Authorities have banned this in multiple regions to prevent stockpiling. Other Russians are coping with humour, turning hours-long waits into makeshift tailgate parties, joking that the best place for a date night is waiting for a fuel tanker to arrive, and that Russia's most expensive perfume is now gasoline. Well, this is getting so much attention that even Putin had to address this, warning that Ukraine's attacks are not just about causing physical damage, but about what he called an information operation.
In order to, at minimum, create uncertainty for us, or even better, to lead to a schism in Russian society.
All this could add to Russia's economic pain. Higher fuel prices mean higher inflation. But there is no evidence yet that it's going to convince Putin to stop the war.
Let's focus in on Ukraine's mission, Ukraine's refinery-focused drone campaign. What does Ukraine achieve with this battlefield strategy?
Ukraine has surprisingly achieved quite a lot if we consider that Russia is the largest producer and exporter of oil. It has an enormous system of refining and transit from land and sea routes. So as a result of these sophisticated drone attacks, Ukraine has taken about 20% of oil refining capacity of Russia. And it's because the equipment to run these stations is expensive. It's not easy to repair, but also it comes from the West, where there are sanctions imposed to limit Russia's access to any equipment related to energy sector. So this consistent attack led to shortages in many Russian regions of fuel. We already see rationing of how much civilians can purchase. They can't have canisters to fill in to store home, but also this will impact the army, first of all, and this is the goal. The gasoline that is used for armored vehicles and all kinds of vehicles, the production of it dropped 25%. So much this is the problem that for the first time, Russia will have to import some of it from sea. So it's in talk with Kazakhstan and India to actually repurchase in India's processed Russian oil that it's refining back into Russia.
And we've seen such, vivid depictions of this rationing. We've seen lines and lines of Russian drivers waiting for petrol in Russian cities, along with the images of blown up Russian refineries. What has all this done to Russia's so-called energy superpower status?
Why? Clearly, it has damaged it to a large degree, and also something that Russian population could probably have not imagined. They have the flashbacks to the 90s when Soviet Union was collapsing and there was deficit of everything. So it's a strange, harbinger possibly of what awaits Russia, and people perfectly understand it. Putin will try to put up a brave show and will try to find alternative sources for this energy. But the question is whether he will have to pay hard currency for this, to which he's also running out because his war chest is drying up. We see Russia runs a huge budget deficit, more than it has expected. So all of this creates really a crunch time for Russia. And especially, let's recall that there will be so-called sham Duma elections, where one way or the other, Putin will have to show up the brave face, telling how this war is going in his favor, which obviously the Russian citizens perfectly understand it is not.
This is, as you put it, crunch time for Russia and for Putin. But is there a danger that Russia's fuel crisis actually could rally the public around the Kremlin instead of turning them against it?
There's always the risk of that, and a nation under any attack is rallying around the flag. There are two questions. One, how long they can sustain this rally, and let's, as I've said, the Ukrainian strikes on Russia, when Russian population started feeling it, is now lasting more than a year and a half. And furthermore, it's attacking Moscow, the heartland of Russia. And also, let's remember, in Russia, it's the economic elite, it's a security elite that also has a huge influence. And if they see things happening, especially in Crimea, somewhere where the fuel shortages are the worst, because it's a peninsula, it relies heavily on everything provided from mainland. The fear is that if Ukraine manages to choke off Crimea, there may be a real panic in the elites whether Russia will be able to sustain this, war treasure as where it's started the war against Ukraine back in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. And if there is a risk of losing this prize, there will be more pressure either to consider, a certain removal of Putin or a serious negotiation with Ukraine to avoid a humiliating defeat.
Rescue operations underway as we're speaking in Kyiv following Russia's deadly strikes on the Ukrainian capital again. Officials say at least 18 people have been killed in the region, and the attack comes on the eve of President Trump heading to Turkey for a huge meeting of NATO allies this week, taunting the NATO allies. Clearly, the White House says, though, Trump will meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky while he is there. CNN's Harry Enton is joining us now. All right. We see this attack. We should look at what's happening inside of Russia. How much is Putin being looked upon by his own people?
Yes.
Outside of the war, watching what's going on with that, and who are dissatisfied with the way things are going, especially when it comes to their personal economies?
Yeah, look, leaders at the end of the day have to respond to the people in their country. And right now, Vladimir Putin is feeling the heat because it's always about the economy, right? And what you're seeing here is, take a look. Okay, Russians who say their economy is getting worse or getting better. You look back 2 years ago, look, the majority of Russians said their economy was getting better. That number has collapsed. Now we're just talking about 27%. Compare that to the percentage of Russians who say that their economy is getting worse. That was just a third 2 years ago. That is up significantly like a rocket to 60% now, nearly doubling in just the past 2 years. This war and, of course, all of the sanctions that go with it have had a tremendous impact on Russia's economy. And you can see it here. The people inside of Russia are not liking the way that the economy is going. And for the first time that we've really seen in recent memory, the pessimism is sky high.
This is a terrible number for any leader
Correct.
Anywhere. That is an awful number. People clearly dissatisfied. I do want to ask you about what's happening inside of Ukraine, and knowing that the President Trump is going to meet with NATO allies. He is on the way to Turkey to do that. How much sway does he have with the Ukrainian public?
Yeah, okay. So, it takes two to tango, or three in this case, the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. And you can see the domestic picture here in Russia is not particularly good. Of course, what Trump is hoping is that, he can, put his finger on Volodymyr Zelensky and, pressure him. But there, the domestic picture is very different, because take a look here. Look at this number. Look at this number. Net approval of U.S. leadership among Ukrainians. Yeah, Sarah is whistling, because this has been a dramatic, a huge shift. When Joe Biden was president back in 2024, U.S. leadership was on the positive side of the ledger at plus 3 points. Look at how this number has absolutely fallen through the floor to now negative 72 points. That is a 75-point switcheroo in the wrong direction. So, look, Trump is going to try and pressure Zelensky to make a deal in the same way he'll try and pressure Putin to make a deal. But Zelensky be like, hey, I'm not going to feel any pressure from my folks if Trump is putting pressure on me, because my folks just don't trust U.S. leadership.
Right. And there's a reason for that. Some of the comments that Trump has made, some of the niceties with Russia, and yelling at the president while they're in war. has been a real problem for the Ukrainian people. I do want to ask you about, this war has been going on now for more than 4 years. And a lot of people thought, even U.S. intelligence thought, that it was going to be Russia taking over within days. The Ukrainians have managed to fight and fight and fight in a way no one thought was possible, including Russia. So how do Americans feel about the war itself?
They do have no confidence in Donald Trump to handle this war. Take a look here. U.S. trust on Trump on the Russia-Ukraine war. Look at this number. Overall, it's fallen from 45% back when Trump was on the campaign trail to just 32% now. And look among Republicans. It was 81% 2 years ago. It is now just 60% now. Trump comes in to any negotiations in a weakened state, given the domestic feelings in Russia and Ukraine and the domestic feelings here in the United States as well.